Hello. Oh, there you go. That's better. Hello, Ghost Story. That's another one of my books, and that's my grandmother's grave on the west coast of Ireland. Um, and Ghost Story, yeah. So it's spelled Storey. Very clever, because it's stories and stories of piles and piles of stories about um, ghosts who have influenced my life. I'll read you a chapter and then you'll see what I mean by all that. Chapter 3, A Ghost That Helped Me. Carlisle was much further from London than I imagined. I knew it was a fair way off, but I did not know that it practically marked the start of Hadrian's Wall. I wasn't very good on geography of England at that time. In my ignorance, because I did not bother to look at the road atlas or the massive Reader's Digest hardback atlas at my mother's house, I assumed that it was somewhere above the Midlands. In those days, I had a decent car, a piece of superb rear-wheel drive sporting machinery that was a pleasure to take on long journeys. A few days before the birthday party that I had been invited to, I had time for my busy work schedule to look up where it was. Was I surprised? I was in fact practically on the borders with another country, Scotland. It was roughly 70 kilometres to Gretna Green, about 44 miles. Uh, and London was 421 kilometres or 262 miles away. Wow. I had been invited by my girlfriend to her younger sister's 16th, a large party for a popular girl. Sensibly, I discussed the adventure with my mother. Popped round to my flat to have a chat with her about things. She had been the life and soul of my party and still was. Her judgment on whether a party would be worth going to or whether it was a non-starter was faultless. She used to always tell us when we were growing up that, that sounds like a great party, or that sounds like a non-starter to me. Invariably, she was right. So it's the ingredients that you need for a good party. From the age of 15, she had been proven right about parties, not only about whether the ones I was going to were going to be a success, but also the ones my five siblings were going to attend as well. Every time she predicted correctly whether a party would be a success or not, and she always insisted that we leave the party at its height, which was sage advice. Always leave the party at its height. Best thing to do. Of course, she wanted all the details so that she could give me the correct advice. Her response had always been eagerly anticipated. We're in the kitchen eating salami, salad, and thick slices of fresh bread, which I sliced with a bread knife, and a glass of Van de Pave wine, which was surprisingly smooth, in fact, naive in its own presumption. At this stage, my mother would rise at 5 a.m. to go to work, return at 3, eat lunch, and sleep from 4 until 7. Being a creature of habit, she followed the regime even at weekends. I bought a flat across the common with my best mate from school and joined my mother for lunch when my busy work schedule allowed. I worked weekends in those days. You don't get a nice, shiny German car for nothing. I worked hard at a brewery, working 7 days a week, selling beer, and it was a company car. But occasionally I would take Saturday afternoon off to visit my mother, who I adored. I've been invited to a party, I ventured. That's marvellous, darling. Tell me all about it, she replied, as I knew she would. You know, Bibby, the friend of mine I mentioned, I said casually, intimating that it might be a bit of a drag. Her sister's having her 16th birthday. My mother hummed the tune. She was only 16, only 16. She was too young to love, and I was too young to know. I took this as an encouragement. Where's the party? She asked, deliberately slipping into an American drawl to reinforce one of her catchphrases. You're in the groove, Jackson. It came from a film that we used to watch with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. You're telling me, I replied, as expected. This is murder. She was still in love with films, and particularly the Marx Brothers and the road movies with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. We shared catchphrases from a myriad movie catalogue, including The Road to Rio. Carlisle. It's a bit far, I know, and it might be a bridge too far, I explained. I had suggested it was a long way in the hope that my mother might consider it too far and persuade me against such a long journey. The distance was beginning to deter me. Not that far, I think you should go, she decided. You're only young once, but don't drive, take the train. It's much quicker, and you won't be breathalyzed the next day. You can really go to a party and drive back. You can't really go to a party and drive back the next day. You might still be over the limit. the alcohol limit, and I didn't want to lose the license on my car or get a huge increase in insurance. There was no suggestion that she would miss me, but I knew she would. She missed every single one of us all the time. To tell you the truth, I was thinking of driving up there, but it seems an inordinately long way, I said, which was true. It would be quite fun to drive up, but then I would have to return. I would have the return trip after the party. Take the train. You'll be less tired when you get there. And you can read, she insisted. Why make life more complicated than it is? So it was settled. We finished lunch with some cheese, and my mother went for a siesta. And I went home. That afternoon, I went back to my flat and packed a bag for the next weekend, a whole weekend off. I could not believe it. As a result, I worked a full day the next day, a Sunday, from 9 until 10:30, when the last pub shut, and I drove home ready for my 5 o'clock alarm on Monday. In those days, I worked for a brewery in the East End of London, Godson's, and they produced a beer called Godson's Black Horse, or GBH. It was easy to sell, but I knew enough about the competitive London drinks market to know that my customers needed visiting on a 3 weekly basis, and my prospective customers need to be visited fortnightly to demonstrate the service we provided. On the following Saturday, I drove from Lavender Gardens to King's Cross and parked outside. It's amazing to think that there were no parking restrictions outside King's Cross in the 80s. Well, certainly when I went to this party in the early 80s. St Pancras and Euston in those days, so I could park there all weekend. I took along a copy of Catch 22, a towel, a change of underwear, a spare shirt, a change of jeans, a t-shirt, 3 pairs of socks, and a feeling of coming closer to reaching my goal, Carlisle. To travel hopefully can be better than arriving was my misquote from Twain or Dickens. So I had been told I could not at that time reliably attribute it. I suspected it had been Twain, but it was in fact Robert Louis Stevenson. How wrong can you be? I was confident in the reliability of the train timetable, and in 3.5 hours I would be there, much better than a trip in the car that would take over 5. Clutching a small navy nylon overnight bag and already wearing my party gear, a pair of denim blue Levi 501 buttonfly jeans, very popular in those days, a white Hilditch and Key shirt, and a navy cashmere jumper. My sisters bought me a wonderful fragrance from Crabtree and Evelyn, so I smelt acceptable. It wasn't really nice. They stopped it, but it smelled absolutely, divine. It was really nice. Well, I like the smell, and everyone who smelt me liked the smell. It's quite unusual, quite spicy. Despite the long journey ahead, I was in good spirits. The train carriage had comforting diesel and dust smell, which reminded me of journeys from my prep school going home from Worcester Station to Paddington. The cloth seats could have done with a good beating. It was so dusty, but provided you sat down carefully, the grime was kept trapped in the dark needle cord covers. I opened my book, looking forward to reading my first cult novel, which would distract me from the 4-hour journey. I'd eaten phenomenally large breakfast, which my metabolism burned off in an hour, but I was trained to wait for lunch. The buffet car was not somewhere you visited, even if the train had one in those days. Certainly tried to avoid it, some curled up cheese sandwiches. The offer was not the best. It was safer and cheaper to take your own lunch with you and buy a can of warm beer if you were desperate. Breakfast kept me going until lunch when we when we changed trains at Crewe, and I ate my ham and mustard sandwich out of its foil wrapper. I'd made it myself, and it was delicious, just the right amount of butter and mustard, and I ignored the temptation to add lettuce and tomato, as I would now. So I wasn't very healthy in those days. Tomatoes go in my sandwiches now. And actually, I avoid ham. There's something carnal about eating bread and meat without vegetables. It was cold on the platform, but I was resilient. It was warmer than being in a fall on the Thames, wearing in shorts and t-shirts as I had been all through the last 2 terms at school. But I could have done with some Grecian heat to warm my bones. All went well until I arrived at the station about 3 o'clock. I left the train at Carlisle in good spirits with plenty of time to get to the party. If everything had gone to plan, I would have been very happy. However, I had left the invitation with the contact numbers written on the bag in the glove box of my car. Back in London, outside the station, it was only having climbed down the stairs, leaving the station, that I realised. Standing next to the phone box, I rummaged through all my pockets, through my bag, and rechecked everything, bar the insoles of my shoes, to find the invitation. I started to panic, but panic turned to despair when I tried to contact the family and learned their number was ex-directory. In those days, you could put your, I don't know, maybe you can do it now, but you could put your telephone off the public register if you were a lawyer or a doctor, or just wanted to avoid nuisance calls. The operator directory inquirers would not be able to give their number to me. That was it. I had travelled hundreds of miles across the length of England from southeast to northwest, all for nothing. I had arrived, but I would not be going to the ball. Disappointed, I walked back to the station. I could feel the blood flow to my face, my pulse quickened. I could feel the contraction of my chest. I was ashamed by my carelessness, embarrassed by my fatuous inability to check everything before I left. I chided myself for my typical impetuous and disorganized departure. I'm afraid I'm impetuous and disorganized all the time. I had resigned myself to the return journey back to London. It had not been a complete waste of time. I'd been able to make quite an impression on the spine of Hare's book, and I could console myself with finishing the first few chapters. The book was enthralling and helped the hours and the miles literally whizzed by. Walking up to the ticket office to find out when the train to London was leaving, I could not hide my disappointment at my stupidity. "Hi, could you please tell me when the next train leaves for London?" I asked, mustering as much charm as I could manage. "Certainly. At 5:42, change at crew. It leaves from platform 3. The man behind the counter replied. He's about my age, in his 20s. "Thanks. I've got to go back to London tonight," I complained, sighing more heavily than I intended. "Well, that's the train you need," he assured me. "I was meant to be going to a birthday party, but I left the invitation behind," I explained, thinking everyone in the world should know about the calamity. "Have you tried ringing someone?" he asked helpfully. "Yeah, they're ex-directory. I can't get the number," I explained, standing as if I were resigned to the idea. What does the family do? Your friend's family. Are they in business? Any clues?" He questioned me further. "The father was a lawyer," I informed him, not knowing how many hundreds of law firms there must be in Carlisle and the surrounding area. "Well, if I was you, I would have a word with the transport police. They might have had dealings with them. They might be able to help." Brilliant idea, thanks. With mounting hope, I left my saviour, who had to direct me to the large office on platform 1. And although there was no one there at first, a distinguished officer in uniform in his late 40s sauntered up to the door and unlocked it. A little later, just as I had settled on the comfortable old-fashioned wooden bench, waiting for him to settle into his seat, I knocked, entered when asked, and politely greeted. "I was wondering whether you could help me. I'm looking for a friend of mine, and her father was a lawyer. Come in and sit down," he offered. I sat opposite him and explained the situation fully. I left out my ham sandwich and the gist of the plot from Catch-22, but I mentioned anything else that seem relevant. "What did you say his name was?" he wondered out loud. "Wilson," I told him. "I know him," he exclaimed excitedly. "He used to sort out our fare dodgers. Hold on." And that, in Ghost Story, is how someone helped me. And it was because I mentioned it to him that I was meant to be going to this party and I lost the invitation or left it behind. And I say to my boys, even now, if you're stuck, ask for help. And 9 times out of 10, you can help me. And Mr. Wilson, he helped me. He's one of my ghost stories, my layers and layers of stories about ghosts. He helped me to get to the party. So ghosts can help you. Anyhow, read the book, and it's full of stories like that and about wonderful characters and wonderful people who I've been very fortunate to meet. So enjoy, and I'll read you something else from one of my other books soon. But if you've got through the whole of this, thank you, and hopefully see you again. Bye. If I can end the meeting.